Welcome. I'm Reverend Jane Coley, and today's talk is how to get out of your story loop using the conscious mind. And as usual, I want to start with a couple of quotes. Both are by Ernest Holmes, the founder of Science of Mind. And the first one says, never limit your view of life by any past experience. And the second one is, the mind is a magnet, and we attract that with which we identify the self. So how to get unstuck from your story loop using the conscious mind. I'm going to use 3 steps today to do that. And one is, first we have to admit that we're stuck in a story loop and that we want a different life. We want to choose a new story. And the second one is that once we've chosen that new story, that we take the next step toward bringing that into form. So then there is this tipping point that happens where the essence of the new us is birthing during this second step. And the third step is that the conscious mind, the divine mind, it's always guiding us all day, every day. So it is weaving in between both of these stories, the new vision and the old. It's always there, present for us. So step number 1, how the telltale signs of finding out that you're actually even in a story loop is what I found out. And I realized in step 1 that there's a level of our own will, our own stubbornness to let go of a habit that we've gotten into. When I fractured my knee, the first several weeks I had to lay very slow. For me, I started with doing my spiritual practice every morning, breath work, keeping everything going. And then I had to find ways to keep myself still lying on the couch because I didn't want to get surgery. So I started watching foreign soap operas. This did not work in my favor after my 3-4 weeks were up, because then I had gotten accustomed to watching these soap operas. I started to tune out my family. I started to tune out other obligations. And I realized I was stuck in a media loop, in my own story loop that I nagged my teenagers about not getting into. I could see this dopamine and what it does and how I'd gotten trapped in my own loop. So for me, once I realized I was in it, I started to notice that part of me was like, why did I even choose this? And then I realized that this isn't a why question. It's more of a how question. How could I get unstuck from this story loop that I had gotten into, that I had somehow consciously chosen? I had ditched doing my regular therapy exercises that the doctor had recommended. So when I went in for x-rays and he said, your quad isn't firing, I knew it probably wasn't firing because I hadn't been consistent with my exercises. And for me, I realized I was also harboring this, is this all there is in my life? Is there was almost like this discontent. Mary Morrissey talks about that, this longing and discontent. So I was like skipping to the love scene portions and these soap operas and reading the subtitles, fully engaged. And it was because I had this longing and discontent. I was stuck in a story loop. And I was being stubborn. I had gotten very accustomed to this and I didn't want to let it go. So once I realized that this doctor mentioned to me that wasn't firing, that night when I read my vision statements, I went, oh my gosh, here I am. I am stuck in a story loop. I need to start doing these exercises every day. I want to start. So I realized that my vision statement was saying, oh, I'm holding out there. I thought, well, my knee's not going to get better until I change something I'm doing to get a new result. So that's exactly what I did. I started to realize that I had this begrudging thing under me that it was hard to do these exercises. But once I broke that down, I realized that that's not true. It wasn't hard. I just had to build it into my routine. So I built it into when I did my spiritual practice first thing in the morning. And then I would do these leg exercises. Or when I did phone calls with my clients, I would be doing my leg exercises. And it got easier and easier. But the first thing in step number 1 was I admitted it. I admitted that I was stuck in a story loop. And I had my vision statements I've been reading every day. I chose that I wanted to bring in this new story, this vision of where I was going. For me, I needed to reach out for support, and that's exactly what I did. I reached out to support to prayer partners, and I said, guess what? I'm stuck in this soap opera fixation. And they were like, what? And I go, yeah. Just admitting it, I just felt so much better. And then this part of me, once that I reached out for the support and they did prayers for me, my divine mind, that voice that's always inside the center of our operation, as Troward calls it, that's always operating, this conscious mind. We just have to tune into it. So I started to tune into it. And the voice got louder and louder, and my spiritual practice amped up. So going back to quote number 1, never limit your view of life by any past experience. Just stay focused one day at a time. That's exactly what I did to get out of my story loop. One day at a time. I saw where I was going. I let go of my old story loop, and I took one step at a time. So step number 1, admit it, take a step. Once you've decided you've taken that step, step number 2 comes into play. And there I realized there's a tipping point. And this tipping point happens because we've let go of our stubbornness, our human will of not listening to this inner voice. And Mary Morrissey calls it this tipping point that is a vibrational match. And we're starting to match this vision where we are going, this center of being more centered in that life rather than the old story. So there's a vibration within that, a frequency to that. And at this point, this is the essence of the new us is birthing in step number 2. I can't say it's easy, but it does build up momentum and things start to speed up in a good way. Like for me, I had put on some weight because I've been laying around. And I started to notice as I got moving, I started to do my leg exercise, the weight started to drop off. My healing was happening faster. I was doing the exercises that had been recommended to me. And in the process, even my finances opened up because my husband and I during one of my practices, that voice that was getting louder and louder, that divine mind, that conscious mind, I got an insight about how my husband and I had already looked at our finances over the last 20 years that transformed it. But I had to open to this new story. I had to become that vibrational match. And that's exactly what I did. And a tipping point, like a teeter-totter. It happened where all of a sudden things just got easier. And there is a point where you have to let go of you have to be comfortable with the uncertain of how that's going to end up. Because once a tipping point starts to happen, things do speed up. There's less and less we revert to the old story. Like, I didn't want to do the soap operas anymore. Now it's very infrequent. I'll even put it on. I'll put it on for a certain amount of time, and that's it. And I just let it go. I'm like, okay, I don't care. I've let go of my attachment around. This new me is birthing. It's emerging. It's the essence of our new story that starts to come forth in the step number 2. Because they say that, doctors say in the medical world that there's 3 different ways we process information they're finding. The amygdala, which is that reptilian part where it's our fight or flight and we just react. And that's where I was hooked up my old story. I was caught in the loop, the dopamine loop, where I just was fixated on it. The emotional part of I wanted the love story part of it. And then the other part where we process is in the intellectual, the frontal lobe. And that was part of me that was saying, well, I'm feeling discontent around my marriage. Maybe if I just watch love stories, I'm going to get better on my own. I'm going to see these examples. And then the third part that they're discovering is what's called the midbrain. And that is like 2 inches straight down from the very center of our head. And this is where we drop into this divine center of operation, as Troward calls it. Our midbrain is the still point, the spiritual point, where all these insights just come through us with this ease once we attune to them. So after a couple of days for me of doing my exercises, doing my kundalini, letting go of some of the weight, taking my first steps, my new story started to really birth in the second phase. And I got out of my story loop. It helped me around my money. So maybe for you, I believe that the first step is admitting that we're in a story loop. So if any of this rings true, whether it's around weight or your finances or in your significant relationship, then admit that, yeah, I've been in a story loop. And then the next thing is, where do you want to go from here? So this step 2 of okay, I'm going to take the first step today. And I'm going to create this essence of the new us that's trying to birth this new story within each of us. And that is step 2, where we take the step, we know there's a tipping point. Step number 3 is that the conscious mind, the divine mind, and as I said in the quote, the mind is the magnet, and we attract that with which we identify the self. So we attach to this mind, this magnet, and that's what we attract in our life. And if we have 50,000 thoughts in a day, which they say, and you're constantly saying, I'm tired, it's too hard, I don't want to do this alone. These are some of the story loops I had, why I even got into the soap opera. Each step that I took to consciously go, whoa, that's an old story loop. Each step that brought me more and more back to that center point, that divine mind, is where I made a choice. I chose the new story, the vision-based living, and I aligned with that truth. I became the vibrational match for that. And this is where we become in alignment with this divine center of operation, this genius within each of us, this step number 3. So just to do a quick review, step 1, we're in a story loop. We're in this lower part of the brain, the amygdala. We're recreating the same thing over and over. We go, whoa, wait a minute. I'm ready to get out of it. We admit it. And then we say, okay, where am I going? Okay, this is where I want to go in my life. I want to release these pounds. I want to be freer around my finances. Maybe take a financial freedom class, or possibly it is in your relationship. You take a class around relationships, or you want to work more with your partner around intimacy. So we take the step. Step 2 is, okay, we've decided we're in the story. We take the step, and there's a tipping point that happens where our old story is less and less a part of our day. And our new story, this new essence of us, is birthing. And step 3, that is happening the whole time. That is the divine center of operation, your mind, that's always there to support us, always. That's where at Yana, we know that there's practitioners that are trained. Like I reached out for support to my prayer practitioners, and we do what's called a spiritual mind treatment, which is an affirmative prayer. And these work, they bypass these story loops that we have, and the truth is the truth, no matter what. And this is the exact thing that a spiritual mind treatment does, is it breaks through all our story loops and gets right to the truth that we are meant to be abundant. It is our divine nature to be whole and healthy. It is our nature to have connecting, loving relationships. We are love at our core. So this is how I'd like to close, is doing a spiritual mind treatment. And I hope that in doing this affirmative prayer, this spiritual mind treatment, that it helps you to take the first step today in releasing whatever story loop you may have going on in your life. So if you can just take 2 deep breaths and release. And again, deep breath. Just stilling the mind, the still point, the midbrain, and release. I just know that the divine mind is right here present. That infinite, that divinity is in each and every person that is here. It is the divine center of operation of all thought, all form, right here. It's the source of all prosperity, the source of all health and well-being. I am one with this power, this being, as Reverend Jane, the divine center, the new story, the divine story. And as I know that to be the truth for me, I know it is the truth for each and every one here. I know that as each one just takes the first step of admitting that possibly there is a story loop running and reaches for support. I see that each one here is supported through spiritual mind treatment, supported through those that are around them that can uplift them, inspire them to be their great self, their divine mind, their perfect right weight, their financial freedom through abundance and prosperity, and their divine connection with who they are, spiritual, divine, and that love just automatically creates health and well-being in all their relationships, including their intimate relationship. I see that for each one right here and right now. And it is in the deepest of gratitude that I know, as I release this into the law of cause and effect, it is already done. God is made manifest in you as God, as the divine center of operation, as wholeness, as health, as perfect right weight, and as abundance and prosperity, checks showing up in the mail, in your bank account, filled to overflowing. That is what I know the truth for you right here and right now. And I release this. And so it is. Amen. Amen. Thank you.